The Holy Gospel of Jesus Christ according to St. Luke. Luke, chapter 3. John's mission and preaching. Christ is baptized by him.
Now, in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, Pontius Pilate being governor of Judea, and Herod being tetrarch of Galilee, and Philip his brother tetrarch of Iturea, and the country of Trachonitis, and Lysanias tetrarch of Abilene, under the high priests Anna and Caiaphas, the word of the Lord was made unto John, the son of Zachary, in the desert. And he came into all the country about the Jordan, preaching the baptism of penance for the remission of sins, as it was written in the book of the sayings of Isaiah the prophet, a voice of one crying in the wilderness, Prepare ye the way of the Lord, make straight his paths. Every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill shall be brought low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough ways plain, and all flesh shall see the salvation of God. He said therefore to the multitudes that went forth to be baptized by him, Ye offspring of vipers, who hath showed you to flee from the wrath to come? Bring forth therefore fruits worthy of penance. And do not begin to say, We have Abraham for our father. For I say unto you that God is able of these stones to raise up children to Abraham. For now the axe is laid to the root of the trees. Every tree therefore that bringeth not forth good fruit shall be cut down and cast into the fire. And the people asked him, saying, What then shall we do? And he, answering, said to them, He that hath 2 coats, let him give to him that hath none. And he that hath meat, let him do in like manner. And the publicans also came to be baptized, and said to him, Master, what shall we do? But he said to them, Do nothing more than that which is appointed you. And the soldiers also asked him, saying, And what shall we do? And he said to them, Do violence to no man, neither calumniate any man, and be content with your pay. And as the people were of opinion, and all were thinking in their hearts of John, that perhaps he might be the Christ, John answered, saying unto all, I indeed baptize you with water, but there shall come one mightier than I, the latchet of whose shoes I am not worthy to loose. He shall baptize you with the Holy Ghost, and with fire, whose fan is in his hand. And he will purge his floor, and will gather the wheat into his barn, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. And many other things exhorting did he preach to the people. But Herod the Tetrarch, when he was reproved by him for Herodias, his brother's wife, and for all the evils which Herod had done, he added this also above all, and shut up John in prison. Now it came to pass, when all the people were baptized, that Jesus also being baptized and praying, heaven was opened, and the Holy Ghost descended in a bodily shape, as a dove, upon him. And a voice came from heaven, Thou art my beloved Son, in thee I am well pleased. And Jesus himself was beginning about the age of 30 years, being, as it was supposed, the son of Joseph, who was of Heli, who was of Matha,
Who was of Heli, Saint Joseph, who by nature was the son of Jacob, Saint Matthew. Chapter 1 verse 16. In the account of the law was son of Heli, for Heli and Jacob were brothers, by the same mother. And Heli, who was the elder, dying without issue, Jacob, as the law directed, married his widow. In consequence of such marriage, his son Joseph was reputed in the law the son of Heli,
who was of Levi, who was of Melchi, who was of Jan, who was of Joseph, who was of Mattathias, who was of Amos, who was of Nahum, who was of Hesli, who was of Nagge, who was of Mahath, who was of Mattathias, who was of Simei, who was of Joseph, who was of Judah, who was of Joanna, who was of Reza, who was of Zorobabel, who was of Salathiel, who was of Neri, who was of Melchi, who was of Adi, who was of Kozan, who was of Helmadan, who was of Hur, who was of Jesus, who was of Eliezer, who was of Joram, who was of Mathat, who was of Levi, who was of Simeon, who was of Judas, who was of Joseph, who was of Jonah, who was of Eliakim, who was of Meleah, who was of Menah, who was of Mattatha, who was of Nathan, who was of David, who was of Jesse, who was of Obed, who was of Booz, who was of Salmon, who was of Naasson, who was of Amminadab, who was of Ahram, who was of Esron, who was of Phares, who was of Judas, who was of Jacob, who was of Isaac, who was of Abraham, who was of There, who was of Nachor, who was of Saruk, who was of Ragau, who was of Phaleg, who was of Heber, who was of Sael, who was of Canaan, who was of Arphaxad, who was of Sem, who was of No, who was of Lamech, who was of Mathusaleh, who was of Henoch, who was of Jared, who was of Malaleel, who was of Canaan, who was of Henos, who was of Seth, who was of Adam, who was of God,